Let's talk about creating a test. For a lot of teachers, it can feel like a chore. And for students, well, it's a huge source of anxiety. But what if we started treating it less like a pop quiz and more like a professional, systematic process? Okay, let's dive into how we can turn test making from just another task into a really powerful tool for improving both teaching and learning.
Now, the foundation for everything we're about to cover comes from some serious academic expertise. It's all drawn directly from a fourth-year university lecture on language assessment. This was given by Professor Mohammed Rida Abbas Youssef at Imam Al-Kadhum College. So we're really tapping into a deep well of knowledge here to get to the heart of what makes a test truly effective.
So here's our roadmap. We're going to walk through this in 5 parts. First, we'll look at the big picture, the professional testing cycle. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty with 3 phases: planning and writing, then reviewing and scoring, and finally, administering and analyzing. And to wrap it all up, we'll talk about what happens after the grades are in.
All right, first up, let's get this core idea straight. A good test isn't just a list of questions you throw at students at the end of a unit. Nope, it's part of a continuous loop, a whole system that's designed for improvement, not just for the student, but for you, the teacher too.
And this quote from our source material really just nails it. The whole perspective shifts, you see? We're moving away from the idea of a test as some kind of final judgment. Instead, it becomes this integral part of the teaching journey. The results aren't the end of the road. They're actually the beginning of the next phase of learning. So what does this cycle actually look like in practice? Well, it breaks down into these 8 key steps. You see, it all starts with planning and preparing the questions. Then you move into reviewing them and setting up your scoring. After that comes actually producing and administering the test. And finally, you close the loop by analyzing the results and, most importantly, using them. See how each one just flows right into the next? It's all about being deliberate and effective.
Okay, let's jump into phase 1. This is where the whole cycle kicks off. This is all that foundational work, the blueprint you build before you even think about writing a single question. This is where you set the stage for a test that's going to be truly fair and meaningful. So, the most important word here is alignment. Your test has to be a direct mirror of what you've actually taught, and it should be based on the official course objectives. You should use an outline to make sure you're weighting the topics right. The more important stuff gets more marks. And here's a great pro tip. Write more questions than you think you need. That way you can be ruthless and just cut out the weak ones. And of course, keep the focus on the material from the current unit.
The advice gets super practical too, especially with timing. How long should students have for each question? Well, for multiple choice, a pretty good rule of thumb is about 1.5 to 2 minutes per question. This gives students enough time to actually think, not just have a knee-jerk reaction.
And please, do not underestimate the power of clear instructions. They should be so simple that nobody has to raise their hand and ask for clarification during the exam. What's the best way to do that? Simple. Always include a worked example for each section or type of question. It just gets rid of any confusion and lets your students focus on showing you what they know. Okay, so you've planned it, you've written it, but you're not done yet. Now comes phase 2, the quality control stage. This is where you're going to refine, polish, and make absolutely sure your test is as clear, fair, and error-free as it can possibly be. And here is a piece of advice that is so simple, but so powerful. Seriously, when you're deep in writing mode, you're just too close to the material to see its flaws. It happens to everyone. That's why it is absolutely crucial to just step away.
The recommended review process is a simple 1-2 punch. First, wait at least a day. Just let your brain reset. When you come back to it with fresh eyes, you'll be amazed at the little typos or clunky phrases you suddenly notice. Then, step 2, get a second pair of eyes on it. A colleague can spot ambiguities that you, the creator, are completely blind to.
So once the questions are rock solid, you need a fair way to score them. For objective questions like multiple choice or true or false, it's pretty straightforward, right? 1 point for correct, 0 for incorrect. For short answers, you can give partial credit, but for subjective stuff like essays, the real key to being fair is to make an outline of the ideal answer before you ever start marking.
And finally, how it looks matters. A professional, clean layout actually reduces the mental strain on the student. We're talking about simple things. Type it out clearly, make sure a question isn't split across 2 pages, and use little cues like continue on the next page. It lets the student's brain focus on the content, not on figuring out the document itself.
And here we are, at the final phase, test day and everything that comes after. This covers it all, from the moment you hand out the papers to the really important work you do after they're all handed back in. This is where the plan becomes reality.
You know, the physical environment plays a massive role in how a student performs. It sounds so basic, but good lighting, a comfortable temperature, and enough space between desks, these things are non-negotiable. And randomizing the seating is just a super simple, effective way to maintain the integrity of the whole thing.
Your behavior as the person watching over the test, the proctor, is just as important. Your job is to be a quiet, helpful presence, but not a distraction. So walk around slowly, but avoid hovering over a student's shoulder. That can be incredibly nerve-wracking for them. And of course, you need to have a clear plan for how to handle cheating if it happens.
Okay, the tests are graded. Now what? Well, one way to analyze the results is called criterion referenced. You set a benchmark, say 75%, and then you see what percentage of the class actually met or beat that standard. See, this isn't about ranking students against each other. It's about checking if the class as a whole is getting the main learning objectives.
And that brings us to the last part of the cycle, which is, you could argue, the most important part of all. The grade itself is not the endpoint. The real value of a well-built test is in the data it gives you to become an even better teacher.
The results are basically a diagnostic tool. They let you go beyond just saying, oh, this student is struggling. Now you can say, this student is struggling with this specific grammar rule, or this whole group of students seems to be having trouble with this particular concept. Now that is information you can actually do something with.
This change in mindset is so important. An at-risk student isn't a failure. Their test result is a signal. It's an invitation for you, the teacher, to step in with some targeted help. It's an opportunity for growth, not a final verdict.
And this is how you close the loop. You share the results so students can actually learn from their mistakes. You use the data to offer extra help that's focused on exactly what they need. You could even think about offering a second chance test. That can be a huge motivator because it shows students that what you really care about is their effort and their learning. And that brings us to the final question that this whole process really asks us. When you see that a test isn't just an evaluation, but that it's part of this continuous cycle of teaching and feedback and improvement, you realize the answer is pretty clear. After the grades are in, the most important work is often just beginning.